The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. And as usual, I have a most interesting guest. His name is Jim Smiley, and he's a baseball fanatic. You were 12 in 1979. Jim, let's start with your earliest memory of baseball at that age, or younger, a little older, and 1979. Take it away, Jim Smiley.
Hey, thanks, Ralph. You know, 79 was a tough year here because 77 and 78, the Dodgers, went to the World Series, and at that age, you feel like, boy, they're going to break through and win it at some point. So 1979 was tough because they were a below 500 team, and it kind of broke your heart. You kept waiting for them to get better, and I remember that being just so difficult and difficult to kind of understand. And 79 was also, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as a kid at that age, we are just meeting the intellectual side of it. You're not just a raw fan anymore. And I find life to be difficult to understand. So I imagine what it was for you at 12. But Dodgers were obviously your favorite team. What's your early memory of going to ball games? Who took you to them? Who introduced you to baseball? And who would you really like to thank for all of that?
Well, there's no doubt that it's my dad. And I remember my dad taking me to a ball game, my first big league ball game in 74, and playing left field for the Dodgers that day was number 22, Bill Buckner. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and Buck hit a home run, and I had never been in a big league stadium with 30, 40, 50,000 people going crazy. And I can remember looking at my dad as if to say, what is this? What just happened? How is this possible? And from then on, Buckner was my favorite guy.
Wow. And naturally, years later, Buckner just simply did not feel the ground ball. And it was my feeling the Red Sox should have put in Stapleton, and it would have saved a lot of trouble. As a Met fan, I'm glad the Red Sox didn't put in Stapleton. So you live with it both ways. Buckner, to me, I remember as just a solid ball player, not a great ball player, but a very good ball player. And and not only that, a good guy. So sometimes we pick our heroes by accident, and they don't turn out to be good people. And I could think of a bunch of people that Pete Rose and all this, Denny McLain. Imagine growing up worshiping Denny McLain and remembering him as a racketeer. So it is tough. Tell me what your dad was like. Was he a big baseball fan, or was just this an outing for you guys?
My dad was born in 1933 and grew up during the Depression, and his own dad left the family to go search for work, and my dad's father died when my dad was 35. So late in my dad's life, he talked about how in some ways he wasn't sure how he'd turn out as a dad, and I've got to tell you, he was just such a a good guy, just an honest, good guy, and he learned to love baseball because I did. You know, we get excited about what our kids love, and he learned to love it even more when my own kids played, and my kids played, and one of them played professionally, and the other guy was maybe even a little more athletic but got injured. And boy, Granddad by that time was just their biggest fan and just a good man.
Wonderful. You said your son played professionally. Were you disappointed that he didn't go all the way? Were you happy that he reached the level he did? I'm just trying to get an idea of your parenthood and the pressures you might have put on him inadvertently. What was that about?
There's no doubt that we, as parents, we do, and it doesn't have to be baseball, but we put on different pressures inadvertently. But the older boy, Jimmy, he really loved baseball and played in high school and got injured his senior year, but stayed with it and decided that he wanted to try to play in college. And he was a pretty good student and ended up going to Division III baseball, and he was captain in all conference up at Whitman College. And it really felt like anything he did was just something to be pleased with and grateful for, and there really wasn't any expectation that he would make the bigs. A little while after Whitman, he was in a special academic program. He got admitted to Columbia University there in New York.
Oh, wow.
And he walked on to Columbia and ended up having his finest year and really did a job up there and had a great year in the Northwoods League, in the Collegiate Summer League, and then ended up having everything wiped away by COVID and wasn't ready to put the ball down, so he ended up playing a year professionally in the Czech Republic.
Wow.
Yeah, and he just enjoyed that
I
so
never
much.
heard baseball associated with Czechoslovakia. Other than Elmer Vallow was, you know everything, so one of the reasons I chose you as a guest, you are a true baseball maven, and you love the game, and it shows through. But Elmer Vallow was a pretty good outfielder when I was growing up, and even a little bit before I reached the baseball age of understanding. Outfielder with the A's, if I remember, Philadelphia A's, and pinch hitter later in the 50s. Good memories you just evoked in me. What is baseball like? What kind of a program do they have in Czechoslovakia?
Well, they have the top league over there is called the Extraliga, and it's a lot like the soccer programs where you have to play into the league. So the bottom leagues, if you finish at the top, you get to keep elevating. So he played for a team that was in its first year in the Extraliga and actually got their first franchise win at the highest level there in the Czech Republic. But there's a great disparity between the top teams in the league and the bottom teams in the league. And the highlight of the summer was what they call Prague Baseball Week. And there they get all of the national teams from across Europe, and they play in a tournament, and then they get all of the import guys, like my son, put them on a team called the International Stars, and you get to face all of the European national teams. So it was quite an experience. And as far as, you originally asked, were you disappointed he didn't make it all the way? To see him go through this and pitch a ton and hit a dinger off of the Swedish national team's pitcher and just soak it in, it was just absolutely wonderful.
Did you go over there with him?
Doggone it, I tried. It was at the height of COVID. And finally, when the travel restrictions were lifted, my wife dropped me off at the airport, and I didn't even have a return ticket. I was just going to stay out there for a month or two. And I got to the check-in place, and the airport wasn't on the same page as the Czech government, and I was denied entry onto the plane. And everybody has a story or two like that from COVID, and it's the only season he ever played that I didn't get to see a ton of his games.
Well, as a father, you must have been disappointed, but your proudness shows through, and the experience sounds great. Let me ask you about your father and you. Did you have aspirations for playing ball? And how did he encourage you along the way?
My dad was a good blue-collar guy who owned his own heating and air conditioning business, and that allowed him the flexibility to coach our baseball teams. And when I say coach, I mean lend his business name to our team that we wore on the jersey, and roll out the balls and hit some balls and make out some lineups. He wasn't a baseball guy per se. And as much as I really loved baseball growing up, I played high school basketball and then coached high school basketball for 18 years.
Oh, wow. How do the two sports, baseball and basketball, transcend? If you're a good baseball player, does it help you to play basketball? If you're a good basketball player, does it help you to play baseball?
Well, what I love about baseball is a couple of things. One is that it really teaches you how to fail and pick up the pieces and move on. So I think that baseball is such a good life teacher in, if you're successful in high school and college, maybe you hit 400. So you're failing 6 times out of 10. As you go up, the failure rate gets more and more. And you have to learn. It was interesting. I was interviewing Greg Maddux once. I covered the Dodgers for 23 years. And Maddux said, we were just talking like this, and he said, what's the most important pitch in baseball? And I said, is it strike one? Is it the 1-1 pitch because 2 and 1 is to your advantage as a hitter, but 1 and 2 you're in a hole? And he said, no, the most important pitch in baseball is exactly the same as the most important pitch in life, and that's your next pitch.
Oh, wow.
So if you just gave up a dinger, you've got to bear down and make your next pitch. If you just struck out Willie Mays, it doesn't matter.
You still have to make that next. That is a terrific bit of philosophy, both for baseball and life. Wow.
I was thinking about your podcast. I've talked to a lot of baseball guys, and it's so fun to talk baseball, but they say that the golden era of baseball is that of your youth, whenever that was, and that's exactly what you're kind of zeroing in on.
Exactly.
There's never a time we look at it with such wide eyes and such awe, and it never quite means the same that it does in our youth.
I've had 32 people interview. You're number 33. There is no one who didn't really enjoy the look back. 45 minutes of talking about when life was different, when we were innocent. You spent a career in sports. You're no longer innocent. How did you get by sports as they are? I worked for Topps Baseball Card Company for 13 years in the 80s and 90s. And I realized right away it wasn't just me going around meeting people and stuff. It's a business.
Right.
How did you keep keep your youthful enthusiasm after you learn that it is no more than any other business, and what we make of it is basically dreams? And how did you get by that? How did you get by loss of innocence?
Well, I really was so lucky. staying on that idea that there's never a greater time than the golden time of baseball from our youth. You know, Buckner was my favorite player, and when your favorite baseball guy retires, a part of your childhood kind of dies with him. And for me, although Buckner was my favorite player, Vin Scully was my favorite baseball guy, and he didn't retire until I was 49. So the ability to go to the job of sitting in the press box and reporting on the game was still a time of innocence where I was giddy nearly every time I'd go, because you'd get to see Vin, you'd get to hear his voice, you'd get to have that part of your childhood that was still intact.
Yes. I'm a Giant fan. I knew that Vin was a Giant fan as a kid. He grew up in New York, went to Fordham, worshiped Mel Ott. And what I admired about him was his incredible objectivity in baseball. He was a Dodger fan, but his youth was as a Giant fan, and he was able to incorporate that into his work. He was tremendous. I hope you send him a copy of this podcast. I'd be honored. So he could hear you and your voice. Have you ever had any radio experience in your life?
A little bit. There, especially during the time when I was covering the Dodgers. Often there'd be a radio or TV situation where they'd call and say, "Hey, would you appear? Would you give us your 2 cents on this that happened or that?" And it's always fun. You know, Scully. It's a couple funny stories on Scully. The Dodgers were playing when there does come a point where it's kind of a job, and you're there till midnight or a little bit after, and then you drive home and you start your day again. And I remember, I used to have to call essentially a play-by-play that was just for data entry. No one would hear it. But I would go to the bathroom during the national anthem, and you'd be in there, and in the press box at Dodger Stadium, there's 2 urinals, and inevitably I'd go during the anthem, and they'd pipe in the song over the speaker there. And Scully would often go to the bathroom too, because he'd be busy once it started.
Right.
So it's the 10th game of an 11-game homestand. Boy, it's getting to be a little bit of a tough run. And Scully comes over, and I'm urinating, and he comes over and saddles up next to me, and the anthem comes over the speaker, and he looks over at me and he says, "They're playing our song." And it was so fun, and you want to make more out of it than there is, and the youthfulness comes back, but you got to leave it alone.
Well, so. Jim, speaking of Scully, I'm sure you've heard, it's on YouTube, the last inning of the no-hitter, the perfect game, rather, against the Cubs. And I think that Joey Malfitano was involved in that inning or whatever. But he spun a tale that was just as good as Koufax's pitching.
Yeah.
It was an absolute gem to hear. So if you look it up on YouTube, anybody out there, give you an idea of Vin Scully. Is there something about Vin Scully that you know? And I'm not looking for dirt, certainly. But I'm looking for ways of enhancing his memory. Besides that priceless story, they're playing our song.
Yes.
Great. Anything on a personal level that you want to share? Yeah,
a couple of them come to mind. He is one of the most gracious and pleasant men you could ever meet. And my spot in the press box was just on the aisle, one row up from Dodger publicity. So Vin would come in and lean next to the cabinet there, right next to me. And whenever the anthem wasn't great, if they had a terrible anthem singer, he wouldn't criticize. He had two things that he would say. He would either look over and say, "She must have had a wonderful audition." And that was as close as he came to criticism. Or he would say, "It sounds like we lost." And that was him really being disgusted. And that was about as close as you could get to him being negative. And it wasn't negative. It was just beautifully Vin. And the other story that comes to mind, you mentioned Mel Ott. I found an old Wheaties ad of Ott, and I brought it into the press box and wrote Vin a little letter about how, you can just close your eyes and see Ott's high leg kick and the magic of baseball and childhood and what it means. And I thanked him for, still keeping my childhood intact in so many ways, and quietly gave it to him in the press dining room. And this was my 16th year of covering them. And while he was always pleasant, he can't remember everyone's name. And I handed him this letter, and I went back to my seat, and a couple minutes later he came into the press box, and he bellowed, Jim Smiley!" And he invited me into his booth, and we just talked, and he thanked me for the letter, and from then on he would ask about the kids. He'd call me by name and was just always just such a pleasant gentleman.
Wow. Nice story. Very nice story. What are you disappointed in today's game in baseball, and what do you find refreshing in today's game?
I'm disappointed that people who profess love for the game find ways to hate it instead of adjusting and finding the beauty in the game that still exists. It upsets me, and it feels like a hollow love, and I think we're resisting sometimes because it's not the game from when we were 12. And if you really love baseball, then you love baseball. You don't just love it from your childhood. And I'd like to see more fans embrace the game still and search for its beauty rather than things they don't like anymore.
Well, let me enhance that statement by saying the beauty they seek can be, you can get that from just the pure athleticism compared to when we were kids.
Yeah.
You see today. You gotta love guys that can play versatile, like when I was a kid, Jim Gilliam.
Sure.
The Yankees had Gil McDougall, and I was taught the value of versatility. And now everybody, I don't know if it's the Rizzo law, but everybody has got to play multiple positions to survive in the game, especially with as many pitchers as they have on the roster compared to position players. So I will tell you my thing is the great athleticism and sure, training, what they eat, what they ingest, this, that, and the other thing has a lot to do with it. But my God, a lot of it is the talent that from Venezuela, the Dominican Republic, China, Czechoslovakia, that could happen again. And Elmer Vallo, that doesn't have to. The memory of him can be evoked in many places, but that contributes to the good part. You've had a wonderful career, a wonderful life.
It's baseball is just somehow inextricable from our family. it was really neat. You know, people will sometimes ask, what's the favorite game you ever attended? And I've been fortunate enough to see some pretty neat stuff. But I'll tell you, through all the years, the most thrilling game, easily, the Dodgers spent $250,000 to get Jackie Robinson's high school field to be a palace. And it was so overdue, and it really breathed life into John Muir High School there in Pasadena. And my younger son, Will, threw a no-hitter, the first no-hitter after it was remodeled, and to see it and to be there and to feel that and see his glee, that's just something I'd trade all the other baseball experiences just to be able to see the guy just love it.
It sounds like you're tearing up.
Yeah, I just love my boys, and it's easy to do.
Beautiful. Talk about your mom a little bit.
My mom, she's going to be 90 in February, and we talk every day, and I get her out to the Dodger game probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, and she loves going to Dollar Dodger Dog Night, and we go out, and the ushers know us a little bit, and Mom has the good Dodger dog, and maybe 2 if she's feeling it, and then about the 3rd inning, I realize it's probably about time to go home, and we gab in the car, and she's just such a positive, optimistic gal, and always has been, and just a great gal.
Well, what she instilled in you and what she and your dad instilled in you is priceless, and I'm thrilled to have you. This was a terrific show, and I'll send you a copy of the book with you in it. How about that?
Oh, I'll read it whether I'm in it or not.
You got to be in it now because I said it on the air.
Okay.
and I don't lie. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Ralph.
I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I am Ralph Tycho, and I'm glowing today. I had a great guest. Adios.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.